A veteran and his dog helped an old man, then inherited his hidden lodge. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's begin our story. It was a cold, quiet evening when Jason, a 43-year-old war veteran, walked his faithful German shepherd, Max, down the narrow, dimly lit street of a small, forgotten town in the Appalachian Mountains. The evening fog was thick, settling around the worn cobblestone roads, and the distant hum of the wind through the trees created a sense of isolation. Jason's army jacket, worn and patched from years of service, barely kept the cold at bay. He had long since stopped caring about the icy air. His focus was on the steady sound of Max's paws on the wet ground. The dog had been with him since his last tour overseas, and together, they had seen both the worst and the best of life. They had nothing left but each other and the memories of a life they had once known. As they walked, Jason noticed a faint light flickering in the distance. It wasn't the usual glow of a street lamp, but something more inviting, a warm, golden hue from an old, dilapidated cabin perched on the edge of a hill. Curious, Jason tugged at Max's leash and made his way toward the light. He had no plans for the night, just walking in the quiet of the mountain air, but something about the glow drew him in. As he approached, he saw an elderly man standing on the porch, struggling to keep his balance in the wind. The man's frail body was hunched against the elements, and he seemed to be looking for something or someone. "Are you all right?" Jason called out, his voice steady, but his heart skipped a beat. The man looked up, startled, and then smiled weakly. "I've fallen, son," the old man replied, his voice raspy. "Can't seem to get back up." Jason's instincts kicked in. He rushed up the steps of the porch and helped the man to his feet. Max, sensing the urgency, barked and nudged the old man's leg as if to say, "We're here to help." Jason steadied the man, his strong hands gripping the frail shoulders, making sure he wouldn't fall again. "Thank you," the old man said softly, his gratitude almost overwhelming. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Jason smiled, but there was a sadness in his eyes. He had done this before, helped strangers, offered his strength when it was needed, but somehow, this felt different. There was something about the old man that seemed to carry a hidden weight, something that lingered beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered. "It's no problem, sir," Jason said, glancing back at the dimly lit cabin. "Let's get you inside where it's warm." The man nodded and, with Jason's help, slowly made his way inside the cabin. It was small, cozy, with an old fireplace crackling in the corner. The warmth from the fire felt like a balm to Jason's cold skin, and Max immediately curled up by the hearth, his eyes never leaving the old man. As the man settled into a chair, he motioned for Jason to sit across from him. "I have a story to tell you," the old man said, his voice suddenly serious. "One that might change your life." Jason raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" The old man smiled, a twinkle in his eye that suggested more than just a simple tale. "You'll see," he replied. "But first, you should know, I've been waiting for you. For both of you." Jason sat back, his curiosity piqued. He had no idea what the old man was talking about, but a part of him felt like the answers were just beginning to unfold. And little did he know, this unexpected encounter would lead him down a path he never imagined, a journey filled with secrets, discovery, and a hidden legacy that would change his life forever. As Jason sat across from the old man, the room seemed to grow warmer, the crackling fire casting long shadows on the walls. The smell of burning wood filled the air, mixing with the faint scent of old leather and dust that clung to the furniture. Max, ever loyal, lay at Jason's feet, his amber eyes watching the old man with a quiet, discerning gaze. The man cleared his throat, his expression shifting from gratitude to something more solemn. "You see, young man," he began, his voice soft but steady. "This cabin, this land, it's been in my family for generations. And for most of my life, I've kept a secret that, in the right hands, can change everything." Jason leaned forward slightly, his curiosity growing. "What kind of secret?" he asked, his voice low. The old man paused, looking deep into the fire as if gathering his thoughts. "It's not just the cabin. It's what's beneath it," he said, his tone lowering even more, as though revealing something that had been buried for too long. Jason felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean? What's under the cabin?" The man looked at him with an intense gaze, as if assessing whether Jason was ready to hear the truth. "There's a hidden vault," he said, his voice a whisper. "A vault that holds a treasure far more valuable than gold or jewels." Jason's mind raced, but he didn't interrupt. The old man continued, his hands trembling slightly as he spoke. "Many years ago, my great-grandfather built this place, but it wasn't just a home. He hid something here, something that could change the course of history. I've spent my life protecting it, but now," his voice trailed off, and for a moment, Jason could see the weight of years pressing on the old man's shoulders. "Now what?" Jason asked, feeling the tension in the room. "Now," the old man said, "I'm too old to protect it anymore. I've been waiting for someone worthy to take it on. I've been waiting for you." Jason's mind raced again. "Me? But why me?" The old man smiled faintly. "Because you're the kind of man who knows what it means to fight for something greater than yourself. You've already proven that. You saved my life, and now I'm asking you to help me finish what my family started." Jason looked down at Max, who was still lying by his side, his ears perked up as if listening intently. He thought about his own life, the battles he had fought, and how he had been searching for something to give him purpose again. The thought of being part of something bigger, of uncovering a hidden truth, stirred something inside him. "What do I need to do?" Jason asked, his voice steady now. The old man reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, weathered key. "This," he said, "is the key to the vault. But there's more to it than just unlocking a door. You'll need to find the right path, and you'll need to be ready for what's inside." Jason took the key in his hand, feeling its weight. It was old, with intricate engravings that suggested it had been crafted long ago. The key felt cold, but something about it made him feel a sense of responsibility. "What's inside the vault?" Jason asked, his voice quiet with anticipation. The old man's eyes darkened slightly. "Answers. The kind of answers that could change everything for you and for the world. But it's not just a treasure of riches. It's a treasure of knowledge, of history, of a legacy that's been forgotten." Jason felt the gravity of the moment. He had been searching for meaning, for something that could give him a sense of purpose again. Could this be it? Could this hidden treasure, buried beneath the old cabin, hold the key to everything he had been seeking? "Where do I start?" Jason asked, feeling a spark of determination. The old man nodded slowly, as if he had been expecting that question. "Follow the path that leads to the hidden room. It's not far from here, just below the floorboards. The key will open the entrance, but the rest is up to you. Trust in yourself, trust in Max, and remember what brought you here." Jason stood up, the key still heavy in his hand. He looked at the old man one last time. "I won't let you down," he said. The old man smiled, his face softening. "I know you won't." As Jason and Max made their way toward the hidden room beneath the cabin, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to uncover something far bigger than he had ever imagined. Something that would change the course of his life forever. Jason stood at the edge of the old wooden floor, the weight of the key in his pocket pressing against his side. Max, ever vigilant, sniffed the ground nearby, his nose twitching as if he too could sense the gravity of the moment. The firelight from the cabin's hearth flickered weakly in the distance, casting long shadows across the floorboards that creaked. Underfoot, Jason looked at the place where the old man had pointed, a small, worn seam in the floor. With a deep breath, he knelt down and ran his fingers along the edge of the floorboard. The wood felt cool to the touch, as if it had been untouched for years, just waiting for someone to find it. His heart raced with anticipation. This was it. The key to a secret, to a legacy hidden away for generations, was now within his grasp. With one hand, he placed the key into the small metal lock, and with a slight turn, he heard the satisfying click that confirmed what he had suspected all along. The entrance was now open. Slowly, he pushed the floorboard aside, revealing a dark, narrow staircase leading down into the unknown. Max, ever loyal, stepped forward, his ears perked and his body tense, as if urging Jason to take the first step. "Let's do this, buddy," Jason murmured, his voice steady despite the rush of adrenaline in his veins. He descended cautiously, the air growing cooler as they moved deeper into the earth. The walls of the hidden room were lined with old stone, and Jason could feel the weight of history pressing in around him. The air smelled musty, like something that had been forgotten for a long time. But beneath the dust and the silence, there was an undeniable sense of purpose. Jason could feel it in the pit of his stomach, the promise of discovery, of unlocking a past that had been hidden for far too long. As they reached the bottom of the stairs, Jason's eyes adjusted to the dim light. He could see shelves upon shelves of old, weathered books and papers scattered about. There were maps, journals, and what appeared to be old family heirlooms carefully placed in storage boxes. In the center of the room stood a large, ornate chest, its surface intricately carved with symbols Jason didn't immediately recognize. It looked ancient, almost sacred, as though it had been waiting for someone to open it. Jason approached it slowly, his hand trembling slightly as he reached out to touch the chest's surface. He could feel the heat of Max's body at his side, the dog's presence reassuring him as he bent down to inspect the chest. The lock on the chest was simple but sturdy, and Jason didn't hesitate. He used the key the old man had given him, and with a quick turn, the lock gave way. The chest creaked open, revealing what lay inside. Jason's breath caught in his throat. Inside the chest were piles of old papers, some yellowed with age, others still pristine. But what caught his eye was a large, leather-bound book at the top of the pile. Its cover was embossed with a design that seemed to shimmer in the low light, and as Jason picked it up, he could feel a strange, almost magnetic pull toward it. The book was heavy, and as he opened it, the first page revealed a map, one that matched the land around the cabin, but with markings that indicated something much more significant. There were symbols, circles, and lines drawn in ink that seemed to tell a story Jason had yet to fully understand. His mind raced with questions. What was this map leading to? What did it mean for him? And why had the old man kept it hidden for so long? As Jason flipped through the pages, he found more details. Entries written in a language that was unfamiliar to him, but strangely captivating. The more he read, the more it became clear that this book wasn't just a record of the past. It was a guide to something greater. Jason could feel the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. This wasn't just a treasure. It was a key to understanding something far bigger than anything he had ever known. Max, who had been watching intently, suddenly barked, snapping Jason out of his trance. The dog's eyes were locked on something in the far corner of the room, something Jason hadn't noticed before. A small, hidden door was partially obscured by a pile of old crates. Without a word, Jason stood up, the book still clutched tightly in his hand, and made his way toward the door. The closer he got, the more his heart pounded. What was behind this door? Was it another secret waiting to be uncovered? As Jason approached, he could feel the tension in the air growing thicker. Max's growls had turned into low whines, a clear sign that the dog sensed something powerful, something dangerous. Jason's mind raced as he reached out to open the door. He had no idea what he would find, but one thing was certain, his life would never be the same again. As Jason reached for the small, hidden door in the far corner of the room, his heart pounded in his chest. Max stood close behind him, his body stiff with anticipation, his amber eyes fixed on the door as if he knew something was about to change. Jason's hand trembled slightly as he touched the old wood, the grain rough under his fingers. The door creaked open with a soft groan, revealing a narrow passage that led into total darkness. Jason stepped forward, feeling the weight of the moment settling in his bones. There was no turning back now. He had already uncovered so many secrets, and something deep inside him told him that this last step would reveal everything. Max barked once, as if urging Jason to move faster, and Jason obeyed, squeezing his way into the dark hallway. The air grew colder, and the stone walls seemed to close in around him. It felt as though he was walking deeper into the earth itself, into a place that had been forgotten by time. His flashlight flickered on as he moved forward, illuminating just enough to guide his steps. The further he walked, the more he could feel a strange presence, an energy that hummed in the air. It was as though the very walls were alive with history, whispering secrets that had been sealed away for generations. As Jason rounded a sharp corner, the passage opened up into a small chamber. The walls were lined with shelves filled with ancient books and relics, each one more mysterious than the last. But in the center of the room, There was a large, stone pedestal, and atop it sat a small chest, locked with a thick iron chain. Jason's breath caught in his throat as he approached it. This was it, the final piece of the puzzle. He reached out and ran his fingers along the cool surface of the chest. It was heavy, solid, as if it had been waiting for him all these years. He could feel the weight of its history, the burden of its secrets pressing against him. Max stepped forward, sniffing the air around the chest. His low growl broke the silence, a warning of something unseen, something powerful. Jason paused, glancing down at his loyal companion. Max's instincts were never wrong. With a deep breath, Jason knelt down beside the chest. Using the key he had found in the old man's cabin, the key slid into the lock with ease, and with a quick twist, the chain fell away, clattering to the stone floor. The chest was now open, and Jason could feel the energy in the room shift, as if the very air had changed. Inside the chest was a stack of old documents, carefully bound with leather straps. Jason's fingers shook as he picked up the topmost paper and began to read. The writing was old, the ink faded with age, but the words were clear. They told the story of the hidden treasure, the legacy of the old man's family, and a map that led to something far more valuable than anything Jason had imagined. As he read further, Jason's heart raced. The treasure wasn't just material wealth, it was knowledge, lost wisdom from a time long past. And with this knowledge came power, the kind of power that could change the world. But there was a warning too. The treasure was meant for someone who could protect it, someone who understood its value. Jason glanced down at Max, his loyal dog who had been with him through everything, and he knew in that moment that he was the one chosen to carry this burden. The room seemed to grow even darker, and the weight of the discovery pressed down on him. This wasn't just a treasure hunt, it was a calling, and Jason had just accepted it. But as he stood up, the chest still open at his feet, a sudden noise broke the silence. It came from behind him, a faint scraping sound, like footsteps in the dust. Jason turned sharply, his heart skipping a beat. Max was already on alert, his ears standing at attention. The scraping noise grew louder, closer. Something was in the passageway with them. Jason's hand instinctively reached for the flashlight, but the beam flickered and died, leaving them in complete darkness. Max growled low in his throat, his body tense as the sound grew closer. Jason felt the hairs on the back of his neck rise. He was no longer alone. The air in the room seemed to thicken, charged with an unseen presence, and Jason knew that whatever was coming, it was not a part of the story he had uncovered. It was something new, something that would test everything he had learned. Max barked sharply, and in the blink of an eye, the scraping sound stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. Jason's heart raced, his mind trying to process what was happening. He wasn't sure what awaited him in the darkness, but one thing was certain. His journey was far from over. The silence in the room was suffocating. Jason's heart pounded in his chest as he stood there, staring into the pitch-black passageway where the scraping sound had originated. Max, ever alert, was now completely still, his amber eyes focused on the darkness ahead. Jason's breath was shallow, his senses heightened to an almost painful degree. Every part of him screamed to run, to escape whatever had made that noise, but he knew he couldn't leave. Not yet. He had come this far, and he had already uncovered too much. The treasure, the legacy, it all had to be connected to whatever this was. Slowly, Jason took a cautious step forward. The darkness seemed to close in tighter, but he forced himself to move. Max followed closely behind, his low growls cutting through the silence like a warning. Then, just as Jason was about to turn the corner, a soft light flickered ahead of him. It was faint at first, like the glow of a distant lantern, but it grew stronger with each passing moment. Jason hesitated, his fingers tightening around the handle of the flashlight, though he knew it was useless now. The light wasn't coming from his equipment. It seemed to be emanating from the walls themselves, a soft, golden hue that pulsed with an energy Jason couldn't explain. The light led him down the narrow passageway, drawing him forward, deeper into the earth. Every instinct told him to turn back, but his feet carried him forward, as if compelled by something greater than himself. Max barked once, and Jason glanced down at his dog, who was now wagging his tail, his eyes bright with excitement. There was no fear in Max, only trust, and Jason couldn't help but feel a surge of gratitude for the dog's unwavering loyalty. Together, they moved deeper into the chamber, the light growing ever stronger, until it bathed the entire room in an ethereal glow. Jason's eyes widened as he took in the sight before him. At the far end of the room stood a stone pedestal, and on top of it lay a large, ornate box. The box was covered in intricate carvings, and though it was old, perhaps centuries old, the craftsmanship was immaculate, the designs telling a story Jason didn't understand. He stepped closer, drawn to it like a magnet, unable to resist the pull. As he reached out to touch the box, a voice, soft and faint, whispered through the room. "You've come far," it said. The voice was calm, almost soothing, but there was something otherworldly about it, as if it were echoing from the very walls themselves. Jason froze. "Who's there?" he asked, his voice rough with tension. There was no answer, just the sound of his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. The air in the room grew heavier, and for a moment, Jason felt as though the very space around him was alive, watching him, waiting for him to make the next move. Max growled lowly, his fur standing on end as the light from the pedestal flickered one last time, then died down, leaving the room in complete darkness. Jason's instincts screamed at him to leave, but he didn't. He had to know what was inside that box. He had come this far, and there was no turning back now. With a deep breath, Jason placed his hand on the box. The carvings beneath his fingers seemed to come alive, shifting and moving, revealing new patterns that had been hidden from view. Slowly, the lid of the box creaked open, revealing a bundle of ancient scrolls inside, each one wrapped in faded cloth. Jason's breath caught in his throat. These weren't just any scrolls. They were the lost writings of the old man's family, the knowledge that had been passed down for generations, hidden away for a reason Jason couldn't yet comprehend. As he carefully unwrapped the first scroll, a surge of energy seemed to flow through him, like an electric current running beneath his skin. The words on the scroll were written in a language Jason didn't recognize, but as his eyes scanned the symbols, he felt an overwhelming sense of understanding wash over him. This was it. The knowledge he had been searching for, the key to unlocking the mystery that had been buried for so long. The scroll told the story of a hidden legacy, one that had been kept secret for centuries, and one that was now his to protect. But as Jason read further, a chill ran down his spine. The scroll also contained warnings about the power of the knowledge within, about the responsibility it carried, and about the dangers that awaited anyone who sought it. He had uncovered something much bigger than he had imagined, something that could change not just his life, but the world. Max growled again, and Jason snapped out of his trance. He looked around, but the room was empty now, save for the pedestal and the box. The voice had disappeared, but Jason could still feel its presence lingering in the air, like a shadow that wouldn't leave. He knew he had to be careful. The power of this knowledge was not something to be taken lightly. He had been chosen for a reason, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was watching him, waiting for him to make the next move. Jason stood there for a long moment, the scroll still clutched in his hands, as the weight of the discovery settled over him. This was just the beginning. Whatever came next, he was ready. Jason stood motionless in the chamber, the weight of the ancient scrolls heavy in his hands. Max, ever watchful, stood by his side, his amber eyes scanning the room as if sensing the shift in the air. The voice had faded, but its presence still lingered, a distant echo in the corners of the room. Jason's mind raced with the implications of what he had just uncovered. The scrolls were more than just historical documents. They were a key to something far greater, a legacy hidden for centuries. The knowledge they contained could change everything. But as he looked down at the delicate pages, he knew there was more to the story than just ancient texts. He had been chosen, but for what? To guard this secret? To share it with the world? Or to become a part of the legacy itself? He took a deep breath, pushing aside the questions that flooded his mind. There was time for answers later. For now, he needed to focus on what was right in front of him. Slowly, he unfurled the first scroll again, his fingers tracing the foreign symbols. Despite not understanding the language, Jason felt an uncanny sense of clarity, as if the meaning of the words was somehow embedded deep within him, waiting to be unlocked. The scroll detailed the history of the old man's family, how they had safeguarded this knowledge for generations, keeping it hidden from those who would exploit it. Jason's pulse quickened as he read further. The document described a powerful artifact buried beneath the cabin, a treasure beyond anything Jason could have imagined. It was said to be a key to a vast network of hidden locations, each containing more pieces of knowledge, more secrets waiting to be discovered. But the artifact was not easily found. The scroll warned of trials, challenges, and dangers that awaited those brave enough to seek it. Jason knew that this was what the old man had meant when he spoke of responsibility. This knowledge was not to be taken lightly. It was a burden, one that could alter the course of history, and Jason now carried that burden on his shoulders. But as he continued to read, the scroll revealed something else, something more personal. It spoke of a choice, the same choice the old man had faced many years ago. The choice to keep the knowledge hidden or to pass it on to someone worthy. The scroll did not explain why Jason had been chosen, but the implications were clear. He was now the guardian of this secret, the protector of the legacy that had been entrusted to him. As he finished reading the final lines of the scroll, Jason felt a sense of resolve settle within him. This was his path, his purpose, and he would walk it, no matter the cost. Max barked suddenly, snapping Jason out of his thoughts. The dog's ears were perked, his eyes locked on the far corner of the room. Jason turned, his heart racing. He had been so absorbed in the scrolls that he hadn't noticed the subtle changes in the atmosphere. The air was thick now, heavier than before, as if the very walls were closing in on him. Max growled low in his throat, his body tense, and Jason felt a chill run down his spine. He wasn't alone anymore. Jason grabbed the flashlight, his hand shaking slightly, and turned to face the darkness. The flickering light illuminated the passageway behind him, casting long shadows across the stone walls. For a moment, there was nothing, just the stillness of the room. But then, a sound broke the silence. It was soft at first, a whisper that seemed to come from the walls themselves. Jason's breath hitched as the sound grew louder, more distinct. It was a voice, low and guttural, as if speaking from the depths of the earth. "You cannot hide forever," the voice murmured. "The truth will be revealed." Jason's heart pounded in his chest. He wasn't sure if he was hearing the voice of the old man, or if it was something else, something darker. Max barked again, louder this time, his stance defensive. Jason's mind raced. Was this another test? A warning? Or had he unleashed something that should have remained buried forever? The air grew colder, and Jason could feel the presence of whatever was in the darkness closing in. The voice spoke again, this time with a more sinister edge. "You cannot protect it. The time has come." Jason stood his ground, clutching the flashlight tightly, but the fear gnawing at his insides threatened to take over. He knew what he had to do. He had come too far to turn back now. This was his legacy to protect, his responsibility. But as the shadows seemed to move, as if alive, Jason realized that the true test was just beginning, and he would have to face it, no matter the cost. He stepped forward, into the darkness, with Max by his side. The path ahead was uncertain, but Jason knew one thing for sure. Whatever awaited them, he was ready. The ancient secrets of the old man's family were his now, and he would fight to keep them safe. No matter the danger, no matter the cost. Jason's heart raced as he stood at the threshold of the dark passageway, the sound of the voice still echoing in his mind. The shadows in the room seemed to shift with an almost unnatural grace, as though the very walls were alive, watching, waiting. Max growled softly beside him, sensing the change in the air. Jason's fingers tightened around the flashlight, the light cutting through the darkness, but it seemed weak against the overwhelming presence in the room. The voice, low and guttural, continued to haunt him. "You cannot hide forever," it whispered. Jason took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. He had come this far, there was no turning back now. Every part of his being told him to leave, to escape the growing sense of dread that surrounded him. But another part, a deeper part, of him, knew he couldn't. He had uncovered too much. He had been entrusted with a responsibility far greater than anything he had ever known, and now it was time to face whatever awaited him. With Max by his side, Jason stepped into the darkness. The narrow passageway seemed to stretch endlessly ahead, the walls pressing in on him with each step. The air grew colder, and the silence became suffocating, broken only by the soft, rhythmic sound of his footsteps and Max's low growls. The further they walked, the more Jason could feel the presence growing stronger, as though something was lurking just out of sight. He had no idea what it was, but he could feel it, an unseen force, powerful and ancient, watching him, waiting for him to make the next move. The hallway eventually opened up into a small chamber, dimly lit by a single flickering torch that hung on the wall. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, ancient and covered in dust. On top of it rested a small, intricately carved box. It was beautiful, and yet, something about it felt wrong. Jason's pulse quickened. This was what he had come for. The key, the legacy, it all led to this moment. But as he stepped forward, a sudden realization struck him. This was not just about uncovering hidden treasure or unlocking forgotten knowledge. This was a test of his worth, of his ability to protect what he had discovered. He had been chosen for a reason, and now, he would face the true cost of that choice. He took a deep breath and reached for the box. The moment his fingers brushed against its surface, a jolt of energy shot through him, like a spark of electricity. His vision blurred for a moment, and a wave of dizziness washed over him. Max barked sharply, his ears back, and Jason felt a surge of fear rise within him. The box, it was alive with power, an energy unlike anything he had ever felt. Slowly, he lifted the box from the pedestal, his hands trembling. As he held it, the room seemed to pulse with energy, the walls vibrating with a low hum. The torch on the wall flickered violently, casting strange shadows across the chamber. Jason's grip tightened on the box. He had to know what was inside. He had to understand. But as he slowly opened the lid, a blinding light exploded from within, filling the room with a brilliance that made him stagger back. For a moment, Jason could not see, could not breathe, as the light enveloped him completely. And then, just as quickly as it had come, the light faded. When Jason's vision cleared, he found himself standing in a new place, a vast, open space, surrounded by mountains and forests. The air was crisp, the sky a brilliant blue, and the landscape stretched out before him, endless and beautiful. But there was something unsettling about it. This place, it didn't feel real. It felt like a dream, a memory, a vision. "Where am I?" Jason whispered, his voice sounding strange in the stillness. He looked around, but there was no answer, just the distant sound of wind rustling through the trees. Max, who had been at his side a moment ago, was gone. Jason's heart raced again. What had happened? How had he gotten here? And where was Max? Panic began to set in, but just as quickly, a sense of calm washed over him. He knew he had to focus. He had to find a way out, to understand what this place was. The answers were out there, somewhere in the vastness of this strange land. As Jason moved forward, he felt a strange pull, as if something was guiding him. He didn't know where he was going, but somehow, he knew that he had to keep moving. The path ahead was unclear, but he was no longer afraid. Whatever had brought him here, whatever trials lay ahead, he would face them. This was his journey now, and he would see it through. He had been chosen, and the legacy was his to protect. As he walked, he could feel the weight of the responsibility pressing down on him. The voice from the chamber, the presence that had watched him, was still there, echoing in his mind. You cannot hide forever. Jason knew the truth now. He wasn't just protecting a treasure. He was protecting something far more important, something that had the power to change everything. Jason moved steadily through the vast landscape, the wind gently brushing against his face as he walked deeper into the unknown terrain. His heart pounded in his chest, but the fear that had gripped him earlier had begun to dissipate. The strange land before him was both captivating and unsettling. The trees seemed older here, taller, their branches stretching out like ancient hands reaching toward the sky. The air felt fresher, richer, and as he took each step, Jason could feel the weight of his mission pressing on him. This was more than just a journey. It was a test of his resolve, his purpose. His mind was still reeling from the vision, the sudden transport to this mysterious place. The box, the light, and the shift in his surroundings, it all felt like a dream. He had no idea what had happened or why he was here, but one thing was clear. He was meant to be here. As he walked, he thought back to the scrolls and the warnings they contained. The knowledge within them spoke of an artifact that could change the course of history, an artifact Jason was now connected to. But the scrolls had also warned him. There were dangers ahead, and not just physical ones. The power of the artifact was immense, and there were those who would stop at nothing to possess it. Jason clenched his fists, the weight of the responsibility sinking in. He wasn't just here to uncover hidden knowledge or treasure. He was here to protect it, to keep it from falling into the wrong hands. Max, who had been by his side since the beginning, suddenly barked, snapping Jason out of his thoughts. The dog's ears were alert, his body stiff, and his eyes fixed on something in the distance. Jason paused, scanning the area around them. He had learned to trust Max's instincts. When the dog was on alert, something was wrong. Far in the distance, through the thick trees, Jason could make out a shadow moving quickly. It wasn't the wind, it wasn't a bird, it was something else. Someone else. Jason's pulse quickened. Whoever it was, they weren't alone. He could feel it, there were more. The presence of others in this strange place sent a chill down his spine. He had no idea who these people were or what they wanted, but Jason knew he couldn't face them unprepared. "Stay close, Max," he whispered, crouching low and moving quickly into the underbrush. Max followed without hesitation, his paws light on the ground as they moved deeper into the shadows of the forest. The sound of footsteps grew louder, and Jason's breath slowed as he inched forward. The wind rustled the leaves above, masking the sounds of their movements. But Jason's heart thudded in his chest as the group of strangers came into view. There were 3 of them, dressed in dark, weathered clothes, their faces partially hidden by hoods. They moved in silence, their eyes scanning the ground as if they were searching for something, someone. Jason held his breath, his muscles tense, unsure of their intentions. He had to know more. Why were they here? What were they searching for? He glanced at Max, whose fur stood on end, sensing the danger that was growing closer. The group of strangers stopped abruptly. One of them knelt down, running their hand across the ground as if searching for a trail. Jason's eyes narrowed as he watched. The strange presence they exuded was like nothing he had encountered before. These weren't ordinary travelers. These people had purpose, and it wasn't good. Without thinking, Jason made a decision. He had to act quickly. If these strangers were after what he thought they were, he couldn't let them get to the artifact. He motioned for Max to follow and moved silently, slipping between the trees. He wasn't sure where he was going, but he knew he had to stay ahead of them. His breath was steady, but his mind raced. As they moved deeper into the forest, Jason's thoughts turned to the artifact. He didn't know how it worked or what it truly meant, but the map, the scrolls, it all pointed to something big, something that would shape everything in his life from this point on. And now, with these strangers hunting it down, Jason felt the weight of his duty more than ever. He had to keep the artifact safe, no matter the cost. He had already crossed the threshold into a world of secrets and danger. The path ahead was uncertain, but Jason knew there was no turning back. He was in this now. He was part of this story, and he would protect it. As he made his way through the dense forest, Jason's determination grew. Whatever these strangers wanted, he wouldn't let them have it. He was the guardian now, and he would do whatever it took to protect the legacy that had been entrusted to him. Jason moved cautiously through the thick forest, his senses heightened as he moved away from the strangers he had just seen. The forest around him seemed alive, the rustling of the leaves in the trees, the occasional snap of a twig beneath his boots, and the soft breeze that carried with it the smell of pine. Max, still alert, moved by his side, the bond between them as strong as ever. They had been through so much together, and Jason knew, without a doubt, that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. He didn't know exactly who the strangers were or what they were after, but one thing was clear. They were searching for something, and it wasn't just any treasure. It was the very same artifact Jason had uncovered. The weight of the responsibility settled heavily on his shoulders. He had been chosen for a reason, and now that reason was clearer than ever. He wasn't just a passive observer in this unfolding story, he was part of it. The artifact, the map, the scrolls, it was all part of something much bigger, something that could change everything. He had no choice but to protect it, even if it meant facing these strangers head-on. The sound of footsteps in the distance snapped Jason out of his thoughts. He froze, his heart pounding as he looked to Max, who was already alert, his nose twitching. The dog's instincts were sharp, and Jason trusted them with his life. They had to move quickly. They couldn't let the strangers get any closer. Jason made his way deeper into the forest, keeping to the shadows as much as possible. He had learned how to move silently during his time in the military, and now that training was coming in handy. Max moved like a shadow beside him, never making a sound, his senses as keen as ever. As they continued through the thick trees, Jason's thoughts raced. Who were these people? What did they want with the artifact? His mind flashed back to the scrolls, to the warnings of the power the artifact held, and how it was meant to be protected by someone worthy. Jason had no doubt that he had been chosen for this task, but he wasn't sure he was ready for what came next. The map in the scrolls had been clear. There were more pieces to this puzzle, more artifacts hidden across the land. The knowledge contained within the scrolls wasn't just valuable, it was powerful, and whoever controlled it would have unimaginable influence. That was why Jason had to keep it safe, no matter the cost. The air felt thick as he moved through the forest, every sound magnified in the stillness. The footsteps grew louder, and Jason knew they were getting closer. He quickened his pace, moving toward a clearing up ahead that he had noticed earlier. It seemed like the perfect place to make his stand, if it came to that. As he neared the edge of the clearing, he could hear voices, low, urgent whispers that made his blood run cold. He peered through the trees, his breath held tight in his chest. There they were, the strangers. They had gathered in the clearing, their figures cloaked in dark clothing. Jason couldn't make out their faces, but he could hear them speaking in low, hurried tones. "We need to find it," one of them said. "It's close. We can feel it." "Keep looking," another voice said. "The man, he's the key. If he has the artifact, we need to take it from him." Jason's heart skipped a beat. They knew about him. They knew he had the artifact, and they were coming for him. His mind raced. He needed to act. He couldn't let them catch him off guard. Jason's hand instinctively went to the small pouch at his side, where the map and the scrolls were hidden. He had to keep them safe. They were his only protection, the only link to the ancient knowledge he had uncovered. Taking a deep breath, Jason turned to Max. The dog was watching him, his eyes filled with understanding. Jason had no choice now. The time for running was over. He had to face these strangers head-on. He looked around the clearing, searching for an escape route. It was too late to back out. The strangers were already spreading out, scanning the area. Jason stepped into the clearing, his footsteps muffled by the thick underbrush beneath him. The strangers didn't notice him at first, their attention focused on the area around them. But Jason knew it wouldn't be long before they realized he was there. He had to move fast. With a sudden burst of speed, Jason sprinted toward the edge of the clearing, his boots pounding against the earth. Max barked once and charged ahead, his speed unmatched. The strangers turned in surprise, but it was too late. Jason was already at the far side of the clearing, Max by his side. The strangers scrambled to react, but Jason was already moving, weaving between the trees with the speed and precision of someone who had been trained for moments like this. His mind was focused, the adrenaline coursing through his veins. This was his fight now. As he ran, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The strangers weren't the only threat he would face. There were more challenges ahead, more dangers to confront. But Jason was ready. He had no choice but to be. His destiny was tied to the artifact, to the legacy he had uncovered, and he would protect it with everything he had. Jason's breath came in ragged gasps as he pushed forward, weaving between the trees with Max by his side. The sound of pursuit was growing louder behind him, but Jason wasn't looking back. He couldn't afford to. The strangers were close now, their heavy footsteps echoing through the forest, and the adrenaline surged through his veins, keeping him focused. His mind raced, calculating his next move. He knew the forest better than they did, having wandered these woods for days, memorizing every trail, every landmark. He had to get to the next clearing, to a place where he could make his stand. The strange feeling he had earlier, the pull of something greater than himself, was still with him. Jason couldn't explain it, but he could feel the presence of the artifact, the power that it held, deep in his chest. It was as if the artifact itself was guiding him, urging him forward, and that sense of purpose made him move faster. He could hear Max's steady breathing beside him, the dog's paws barely making a sound on the forest floor. They were a team, Jason and Max, and together, they had faced countless challenges before. But this was different. The stakes were higher now. As the clearing came into view, Jason's heart quickened. He was almost there, but so were the strangers. He could hear their voices now, their words sharp and desperate. "He's close. Keep moving." Jason barely had time to register the words before he reached the edge of the clearing. Without slowing down, he darted toward the thick brush at the far side, crouching low to the ground. Max followed, his instincts matching Jason's. Every move, they had to get to higher ground. The strangers would be entering the clearing at any moment, and Jason knew they would be looking for any sign of movement. He moved quickly, making his way up the small hill that led to a rocky outcrop. It wasn't much of a hiding place, but it would give him a vantage point. From here, he could see the entire clearing, and he could see them, 4 of the strangers, moving cautiously into the center, their eyes scanning the trees. They were armed, but Jason wasn't afraid of their weapons. He had the advantage of surprise, and he wasn't about to let it slip away. He crouched low, his body pressed against the rock, and waited. He didn't have long to wait. The strangers were moving in closer, their voices getting louder. Jason's hand instinctively went to the pouch where the map and the scrolls were hidden. He had to protect them. He had to make sure that whatever happened, the knowledge within those scrolls stayed safe. His fingers brushed the parchment, feeling the weight of the task ahead. They couldn't let the strangers get to them. Jason knew that now. The strangers had been searching for the artifact, but what they didn't know was that they were too late. The artifact wasn't just an object. It was part of something much larger, something that Jason now understood was tied to the fate of this land. The power it held was not just for personal gain. It was meant to protect, to guide, and it had chosen him for that purpose. The strangers, however, did not share that vision. Their motives were far less noble. They were here for one reason only, to control what they couldn't understand. Jason's grip tightened around the flashlight as he surveyed the clearing below. He was ready. The strangers had spread out, but they were still too close together. They weren't yet aware of his position, and he intended to keep it that way. He waited, listening to the sounds of their movements. The wind had picked up, rustling the leaves and making it harder for them to hear. This was his moment. He could see one of the strangers break off from the group, moving toward the rock outcrop where Jason had hidden. Jason's heart skipped a beat, and his hand instinctively went to the small knife. At his belt, he wasn't going to wait for them to find him. As the stranger drew closer, Jason sprang into action. With a quick, fluid motion, he lunged from his hiding spot, tackling the stranger to the ground. The man let out a surprised grunt as he fell, but Jason was already on top of him, using the weight of his body to pin him down. Max barked from behind him, adding to the chaos. The other strangers heard the noise and began to turn, but Jason wasn't done yet. He drew the knife, its sharp edge glinting in the moonlight, and held it against the man's throat. "Stay back," Jason hissed. "One more move, and I'll make sure you never see the light of day again." The other strangers hesitated, their eyes shifting between Jason and their fallen companion. They were armed, but they knew better than to engage with a man who had the upper hand. For a long moment, no one moved. Jason's breathing was heavy, his eyes fixed on the group, waiting for them to make their next move. They had underestimated him, and now they were paying the price. Jason wasn't just fighting for his life. He was fighting for the future of the artifact, for the legacy that had been placed in his hands. And he wasn't going to let it fall into the wrong hands. The standoff lasted only a few more moments before the strangers backed down, their hands slowly rising in surrender. Jason's grip on the knife didn't waver. He wasn't done yet. Not until they were gone. "I'm not here to fight," the leader of the group finally said, his voice calm but filled with authority. "We just want the artifact. Its power beyond anything you can imagine." Jason's jaw clenched. "You'll never get it." He stood, still keeping his knife trained on the leader. He wasn't going to let them take what didn't belong to them. Not now, not ever. Jason's grip on the knife tightened as he held it steady against the stranger's throat, every muscle in his body alert and ready for the next move. The others in the group had backed off, their hands raised in surrender, but Jason knew this moment was far from over. The leader, still on the ground beneath Jason, stared up at him, his eyes cold and calculating. Jason's breath came in. Slow, steady exhalations as he weighed his options. He wasn't going to let them get away with this. The artifact, the legacy, had to be protected, and he was the only one standing between these strangers and the power they sought to claim. We don't have to do this, the leader said, his voice quiet but forceful. You don't understand the full extent of what's at stake. We can help you. We just need the artifact. Jason's jaw clenched. You want to use it. You don't care about understanding it. And I won't let you take it. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. For a moment, neither of them moved. The tension was thick, the only sound the rustling of leaves in the wind. Then, the leader's lips twisted into a thin smile. But there was no humor in it, only cold calculation. You think you can keep it from us? He asked, a challenge in his tone. This isn't just about power. It's about survival. You don't even know what's coming. Jason's stomach tightened. The leader was playing some game, trying to break his resolve, but Jason wasn't going to let him win. I know enough, he replied. I know what's at stake. And I know you're not the one who's going to control it. Max, who had been standing at Jason's side, his ears back and tail stiff, let out a low growl, sensing the tension in the air. Jason turned his head briefly to glance at the dog, who gave him a reassuring look. They had been through worse. They could handle this. He returned his focus to the leader. I'm not giving it to you, Jason said firmly, his voice unshaken. The leader's smile faded, and for a moment, there was something in his eyes that hinted at anger, but also something else, something more calculated. The other strangers stood back, watching, but Jason could see the flicker of uncertainty in their eyes. The leader was losing control of the situation. Jason's mind raced. If he could just hold them off a little longer, if he could keep the artifact safe, he might be able to stop them for good. But how? He didn't have time to come up with a plan. The group was closing in on him, and they wouldn't be this easy to stop. Without warning, the leader lunged toward Jason, his hand reaching for the knife. Jason was ready. He sidestepped quickly, using the leader's own momentum against him, and brought his knee up into the man's chest. The leader grunted, stumbling back, but before he could recover, Jason slammed him against a tree. The leader's breath came out in a sharp gasp, but he didn't fight back immediately. Instead, he glared at Jason, his eyes filled with cold hatred. You think you've won? The leader spat. You think you can stop this? You don't understand what you're dealing with. It's bigger than all of us. You're just a pawn in a much larger game. Jason's chest tightened. He had heard enough. The leader was trying to get into his head, trying to make him doubt his mission, but Jason wasn't going to fall for it. He had made it this far, and he would see it through. I understand more than you think, Jason said, his voice low and steady. I understand that I'm the one who's standing between you and the artifact. And that's enough. With that, he let go of the leader, shoving him away. The man staggered back, a look of disbelief crossing his face. Jason didn't give him another chance to react. He turned quickly, sprinting through the forest with Max right on his heels. Behind him, he heard the leader shout orders, but Jason didn't look back. He couldn't afford to. His thoughts raced as he ran, the sounds of pursuit growing louder. He had to get to the artifact, had to protect it. There was no time for hesitation. As he pushed forward, Jason could feel the weight of the mission pressing down on him. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It wasn't even just about protecting the artifact. It was about something deeper. He had been chosen for a reason, and he could no longer afford to be passive in this. He had to take control. The forest stretched out before him, endless and dark, but Jason wasn't afraid. He had faced worse before. He had faced enemies, and he had survived. He wasn't going to let them take this from him. The wind howled through the trees, a harsh reminder of the storm that had passed earlier. But this storm was different. This was the storm he had to weather. And he would. Jason would protect the artifact, no matter the cost. He wasn't just fighting for his life anymore. He was fighting for the future. Jason's heart was pounding in his chest, his breath coming in short, sharp gasps as he sprinted through the forest. The sound of footsteps behind him was growing louder, and he knew they were getting closer. The strangers weren't far behind, but he wasn't about to let them catch him. He had come too far to let them take the artifact, the legacy that had been entrusted to him. He glanced over his shoulder for a brief moment, his eyes locking onto the figures trailing him through the trees. There were 5 of them now, all moving with purpose, their eyes scanning the woods, trying to keep up. They were determined, but Jason was faster. He could hear Max's steady panting beside him, the dog's paws hitting the ground with rhythmic precision. Jason had learned long ago to rely on his instincts, and right now, they were screaming at him to keep moving. He could feel the weight of the scrolls and the map hidden beneath his jacket, the knowledge that had been entrusted to him, and it pushed him forward. This was bigger than him. The artifact wasn't just a relic of the past. It was a key to something far more powerful, something that could change everything. As he ran, the path ahead grew more treacherous. The forest became denser, the trees closing in around him, the underbrush thick with roots and fallen branches. Jason's eyes darted from side to side, searching for any advantage, any way to shake the strangers off. His mind raced, calculating his options. He couldn't outrun them forever. They would catch up eventually, and when they did, they would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. He had to think fast. Ahead, he saw a large rock formation, towering over the forest floor like an ancient sentinel. It was the perfect place to make a stand. He veered off the path, moving toward the rocks, hoping the strangers wouldn't be able to anticipate his move. Max barked once, as if urging him to hurry, and Jason pushed himself harder, his legs burning with the effort. He reached the base of the rocks and quickly scaled the rough surface, using his hands to grip the cracks in the stone. Max followed, jumping up the rocks with ease, his agility unmatched. Jason didn't look back as he pulled himself onto the top of the rock formation, crouching low to avoid being seen. He surveyed the forest below, his eyes scanning the trees for any sign of movement. The strangers had slowed their pursuit, but they weren't far behind. He could hear their voices now, calling to each other as they searched the area. Jason's grip on the rock tightened as he waited, his breath steadying. He knew this was the moment. He had to make it count. From his vantage point, he could see the entire clearing below. The strangers were scattered across the forest floor, their eyes darting around, trying to spot him. Jason's mind raced as he tried to come up with a plan. He needed to keep them distracted, keep them from getting any closer to the artifact. He reached into his jacket and pulled out one of the smaller stones he had collected earlier in the forest. It was heavy and solid, perfect for what he had in mind. With a quick glance to make sure no one was looking directly at him, he tossed the stone toward a cluster of trees on the far side of the clearing. The stone hit the ground with a sharp crack, sending a spray of dirt and leaves into the air. Instantly, the strangers turned in that direction, their attention diverted. Jason didn't waste any time. He slid down the rock face as quickly as he could, landing lightly on the ground. Max was right behind him, following without hesitation. The moment they hit the forest floor, Jason dashed toward the other side of the clearing, using the cover of the trees to hide his movements. He could hear the strangers yelling at each other, calling out in confusion, but he didn't stop. He had to get to the artifact before they did. The path through the forest was narrow, winding, and filled with obstacles, but Jason moved with purpose, navigating the terrain with the confidence of someone who knew it well. The trees began to thin, and soon, Jason found himself at the edge of the forest, looking out at the open plain that stretched before him. In the distance, he could see the glint of sunlight reflecting off something shiny. His heart skipped a beat. There, in the middle of the open field, was the artifact. It was resting on a stone pedestal, bathed in the golden light of the afternoon sun. Jason knew he had to act fast. He couldn't let the strangers reach it first. He turned to Max, giving him a firm nod. "Stay close," he whispered. The dog responded with a quiet growl, his eyes locked on the field ahead. Together, they sprinted across the open ground, their footsteps muffled by the grass. Jason's pulse raced as they closed in on the pedestal. He could hear the strangers' footsteps in the distance, but they were too far behind now. He was almost there. Just as he reached the pedestal, he skidded to a stop, his eyes locking onto the artifact. It was more magnificent than he had imagined, its surface covered in intricate carvings that seemed to shimmer in the sunlight. But as he reached out to touch it, he felt a sudden chill. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. He wasn't alone. He turned sharply, his eyes scanning the horizon. The strangers had caught up. They were closer than he had thought, and they were moving fast. Jason's pulse raced as the strangers emerged from the trees, their eyes narrowing in on him as they approached the pedestal. The sunlight glinted off their weapons, and Jason felt the weight of the moment pressing on him. Max, at his side, growled low, his body tense, ready to spring into action at any sign of threat. Jason didn't take his eyes off the strangers as he stepped closer to the artifact, the power of it humming beneath his fingertips. He had made it this far, but now was the true test. The strangers, now just a few paces away, stopped and stood in a line, eyes locked onto him. The leader, the same man who had spoken to him before, stepped forward with a smug smile. "You really think you can keep it from us?" the leader said, his voice dripping with disdain. "You're just a man with a dog. We have the resources to take it from you. You can't fight all of us." Jason's grip on the artifact tightened, but he didn't speak. He knew the time for words had passed. The weight of the responsibility pressed down on him, but he wasn't going to let them have it. Not this time. "You're wrong," Jason finally said, his voice steady, unwavering. "I'm not just a man with a dog. I'm the one who's been chosen to protect this. I don't care what you do or how many of you there are. I'm not handing it over." The leader's smile faltered, and for a moment, Jason could see a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. But then, the leader's face hardened, and he nodded to the others. Without warning, the strangers advanced, moving quickly and silently toward him. Jason's mind snapped into action. There was no time to think, only to react. He moved with the swiftness of someone who had been trained for this very moment, sidestepping the first man who lunged at him and sending him crashing to the ground. Max was beside him in an instant, biting at the leg of another stranger who tried to flank them. Jason's heart pounded as he fought, using every ounce of his strength to keep them at bay. He was no stranger to combat, but this was different. He wasn't just fighting for survival. He was fighting for something far bigger than himself. The strangers didn't stop, and Jason could feel the weight of their attacks coming at him from every direction. But the artifact, he couldn't let them take it. With every move, every strike, he knew this was the defining moment. He had been chosen for a reason, and he wasn't going to let that reason slip away. The fight raged on, and just when it seemed like the strangers might overwhelm him, Jason found his opening. He sidestepped another attack, using his body weight to send the leader crashing into the ground. In that split second of confusion, Max lunged, knocking one of the other strangers to the ground with a growl that shook the air. Jason stood tall, the artifact still clutched tightly in his hands, his eyes scanning the remaining men. They hesitated, some of them wounded, others uncertain, but none of them willing to give up. "This is your last warning," Jason said, his voice cold, a threat in his words. "Leave now. I won't hesitate to defend what's mine." The leader, gasping for air on the ground, glared at Jason, his face twisted in fury. "You're a fool," he spat. "You don't know what you've just done. This isn't over. You'll never keep it safe." Jason's grip on the artifact tightened, but he didn't respond. He didn't need to. The strangers, now broken and defeated, slowly backed away. Their resolve had crumbled, and they knew they were no match for him. Jason watched them carefully, not lowering his guard until they finally turned and disappeared into the trees, their retreat marked by the sound of hurried footsteps. Jason stood there, the adrenaline slowly ebbing away, leaving him breathless and exhausted. Max trotted over to him, wagging his tail, as if to say, "We did it." Jason took a deep breath, his body still tense, but slowly relaxing. The forest around them was silent once again, but the weight of what had just transpired hung heavily in the air. He had won this battle, but he knew the war wasn't over. The artifact, the knowledge within it, was still his responsibility to protect. The path ahead would be dangerous, but Jason was no longer afraid. He had found his purpose, and he would see it through, no matter what came next. He turned to Max, who was looking up at him with those knowing amber eyes, and smiled. "Let's go, buddy," Jason said softly. They had made it through this fight, but the journey wasn't over yet. And with the artifact in his hands, Jason knew that whatever came next, he was ready.